Today's episode is called Getting Burned, and it'll be an interesting one to talk about. Let's see, we are on day 79, and if you're following along on the dates, we're on March the 20th. And as you know, I start out with a morning rinse, which is the compilation of chapters to read because we are on a journey of reading through the Bible in a year. So today's morning rinse is Ezekiel 13 through 15. So go ahead and pause this and read that morning rinse and come on back. And just so you know, the featured verse is Ezekiel 15:5. All right, welcome back. Let's read the featured verse. Ezekiel 15:5 is, "Behold, while it is intact, it is not made into anything. How much less when the fire has consumed it and it is charred, can it still be made into anything?" Through the years of my faith and being a preacher's kid as well as a preacher's grandkid, I have heard so many sermons on the importance of going through the fire. And if you are a Christ follower or you are walking on this journey, you probably have heard a lot of sermons about this subject as well. And rightfully so. I mean, many of these sermons have referenced the hard times that we will go through. And that is what we kind of liken as to the fire. We're going through the fire. And going through the fire actually allows God to work in us. And if we yield to that burning process, we will come out as gold. And if you've heard any analogies about gold, you know that the process of refining the gold, getting it hot as possible and coming out as gold, that's called the refining of it. And this analogy is so true. However, Ezekiel's message mirrors sin and how the Israelites were useless to God due to their idol worship and living in their flesh. And in today's morning rinse, we read in chapter 15 where that useless vine is compared to those in Jerusalem. And honestly, if we are not careful, our fleshly nature, just like the sinful nature of those in Jerusalem, can be compared to this vine. Our sinful nature does not do any good for God's kingdom. So the flesh that is inside of us, that fleshly part of our soul, it must be burned or destroyed to make room for God's purpose and his will for our lives. So when our flesh gets burned, obviously it is not a fun process at all. It hurts, just like fire hurts if we get burned. The fire of the Holy Spirit also hurts. And what it hurts is usually our pride. It hurts our heart some of the time because we know that we have sinned. It can hurt just our soul when we hurt God. I mean, there's certain levels of pain. You know, if it hurts our pride, then, you know, that is one issue. But if it hurts our heart, we know that our heart is right where it needs to be, right? And we can have pain in multiple areas when we are burned with God's fire. But getting these areas burned out of us, it's going to fuel our spirit life. For those of you who have struggled in an area and just cannot seem to conquer this one area, I want you to be of good cheer because God is not finished with you yet. Don't give up on him. Don't give up on yourself. Just keep committing to that burning process. And sometimes our flesh is going to go through one fire, and then it's going to need to go through a second fire, and then it's going to need to go through a third fire in order for it all to get burned out of us. You know, it may take multiple burnings until all that is left are the ashes with nothing left to burn. And, you know, we hear about how ashes can be made into something beautiful. And this is also that way. I mean, our ashes from the burning process can be made into something so beautiful. When we give it all to God, we have to give it all to God again and again. And that's why the Bible is so important. I mean, we're reading Ezekiel, right? I mean, we're not reading the book of Psalms or another book where it's all like, you know, worship and all this. I mean, the book of Ezekiel is kind of a tough book to read because he is really, really prophesying to the Israelites and trying to get them to obey. And so when we read a whole book like this, every day it seems like there's some kind of message that we're reading to, change our ways or obey a little bit more. And that's just how the Bible is lined up, right? We may be going through seasons where that's what we need to hear. Like every day we might need to be hearing something like this. And then the message will go to something different. Like, maybe we need to hear about love in the next month or something of that nature. Just don't be discouraged, because I know that every single day I'm talking about what is it in your life that can be made better and closer to God. And today is just another part of that, giving it all to God again and again and again, so that we can continually be burned. Just like yesterday, I talked about having heart surgery and getting that stony part of our heart out of our heart so that God can replace it with flesh so that we feel more and love him more and obey more. And today's the same thing. It's like, what is it that we need to burn out of us so that God can continue to use us? And the more flesh that we, put through God's fire. And when I'm talking about flesh today, it's different than what I talked about yesterday with God giving us a heart of flesh. That heart of flesh is so close to him. But when I'm talking about today's flesh, that's the part of our soul that needs to be burned out. So there's a difference in the two fleshes, basically. But the more flesh that we put through God's fire, ultimately, the brighter the flame of our spirit is going to be. God takes us through the burning process so that he can make us into something for his kingdom. And I encourage you to yield to getting burned. So today's challenge to dig deeper is, as you go about your day, just continue as you are already. Just continue to listen to God and ask him to show you any parts of your flesh that need to be burned or that does the kingdom no good. So if he shows you an area of your heart that needs to be burned, then allow him to walk through the process until it's gone. And commit to getting it done today. Then ask him to help you fill that empty void with him so that you can continue to walk closer and closer and closer to God. And I know that it's a weird thing. I know that it's probably a weird prayer, maybe for some of you who have never prayed this before. But when we are constantly open to the purging of our soul and God giving us closer and closer, or getting us closer and closer to him, these prayers are just going to be natural. So when you pull out your journal and reflect tonight, I want you to answer this question. What part of your flesh was burned today? How are you going to fill the void of that thing that was burned out of you in the future? And you might not necessarily know all the details yet, but if God was speaking to you today about a piece of your heart or, an action that you got burned today on, then write it down and see how much you're going to grow in this month. And see how much you're going to grow, even continually reading the book of Ezekiel. And I hope that these studies and these devotions continue to inspire you to realize that you might not necessarily be living in this big overall huge life full of sin, but it is a reflection of, there can be moments and seasons in life where we might need a little bit of an attitude tweak, or we need to talk to our loved ones in a little bit of a better tone. Those are things too that we can ask God to help us do better at every single day of our lives. And if we make a mistake, just remember, God, burn it out of me so that I never do that again. We are not perfect, but we can strive to be as close as possible. I just want to encourage you, and if you don't have my devotional yet, the link is in the show notes, or if you don't have the journal yet, then the link is also in my show notes. And until tomorrow, keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating. God bless you.